This is Edward October, host of Octoberpod on YouTube. Hear that jingle jingle? It could be Kris Kringle, or a home invader looking for an open window, a jilted lover looking for revenge, or a disgruntled coworker hoping to spike your eggnog with arsenic. The girls of our true crime podcast are always on Santa's nice list, but the crimes they discuss are very naughty indeed. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, hi, Jen. How are ya?
I'm doing well.
That was a weird open. I apologize for that.
Almost like you had a mini stroke there.
I did kind of. Sorry about that. Welcome to day 5.
Bye. Woo! We hope you are doing well. We're hoping you are finished with your holiday shopping and you're to the wrapping part. And if you are wanting to make cookies, I suggest you start now. Probably should have started a couple weeks ago, but
You're fine. Don't you listen to Jen. You got this.
You got it. You can do it. If not, you know what? Bakeries make really good cookies.
That's right.
Just buy them. Save yourself the hassle.
Yep. Put them in the microwave, warm them up, and pretend like you did it. That's what I say.
Yep. Well, actually, that's kind of what we did. My youngest daughter's choir had a cookie dough fundraiser, so I just bought a couple tubs, and that's what we're using.
That's what I do.
It's so much easier.
Nobody'll know.
And you know what? You can get the fancy ones, but my family, we're the chocolate chip lovers, you know?
Yeah,
the only one that they love is the Butterfinger peanut butter cookie. That's a little fancier, but that's still easy. So, yeah.
Okay. Heck yeah. Look at Jen being all bougie. Bougie fancy.
Bougie with
all
the
right,
Butterfingers. All right. What
there
you got for us?
For day 5, we are going down under on Saturday, June 4th, 1961. We are actually in Brisbane, Australia, where a 55-year-old man named Amos Hurst meets a gentleman outside the Roma Street Railway Station. The two of them partake in lots of drinking, and not wanting to end the night, the two head back to Hurst hotel room where they continued to drink. As the pair drank to near oblivion, Amos passes out, only to wake up with his new friend strangling him. Amos tried to fight back, but was hit so hard in the face, the hit killed him. The killer then undressed Amos and put him in the bed as if he were just sleeping, and the killer made his escape. For days, the murderer would obsessively check the newspapers for the death. Finally, I think it was about 5 days later, Amos Hurst's obituary was in the paper, claiming that Amos had simply died of a heart attack. The man had just gotten away with his first murder and was now on the prowl in Brisbane for his next victim. Shady bars and stale smoke-filled taverns packed with people down on their luck was his hunting ground. This is where he meets his victims. This one is a man who looked like the man who had actually raped him a long time ago while he was in the military. The two of them began chatting it up and took a few bottles of liquor to a park where they would continue to drink. Again, the killer waited until the man was passed out. He then took his knife, one that he had just recently purchased specifically for this purpose, and drove it into the man's neck. Just as quick as the attack came on, it left. The killer simply stood up and left, leaving the man there to live another day. He didn't kill him. He survived.
Well, good for him. That's what you're supposed to do. Thank you for doing the bare minimum.
On June 4th, 1961, a man's nude body had been found at the Sydney Domain bath. The victim had been stabbed over 30 times, but this time, the killer's rage had changed. The man's genitalia had been cut off from his body. The man was ID'd as Alfred Reginald Greenfield, a homeless and unemployed resident. Just like the previous victims, he had been viciously stabbed and left in a public place. Once the media heard about the mutilations, his moniker was born. He would be called the Mutilator, and he was far from being finished. Mm-hmm. This time, the papers would run with the crime leading the front page. In fact, the papers would not even print the true details of the crime, but mentioned Alford was stabbed over 30 times, and police had located various body parts in the Sydney harbor.
It's never a good thing to see body parts floating up in the harbor.
Well, the body parts were you-know-what.
Mm-hmm.
Alford had been hanging out and drinking in Green Park in Darlinghurst. A man struck up a conversation with Alford and asked him if he would like to join him at the Sydney Baths, where they could continue drinking. Now, the baths, with all their little nooks and crannies, often made a good spot to drink or to do things that are not really made for prying eyes, if you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Just as before, the killer waited until his victim fell asleep and then stabbed him in the neck. He then took off Alford's pants and severed his genitals. He packed them in a bag and tossed them into the Sydney harbor. The third murder victim would be identified as Ernest William Cobbin. Now, his age was not definite, I guess due to being such a heavy drinker. He was believed to be somewhere in his late 30s to late 40s. They had around a 10-year frame. His body would be found at Moore Park near the public restrooms. Like the others before him, he was lured to the area with the promise of more drinking. Once at the public restroom, the two continued drinking inside. Ernest sat down on a toilet as he was drinking. As he was doing this, the killer put on his raincoat and then struck Ernest right in the neck, severing his jugular vein. Ernest tried to fight the attacker, but eventually passed out due to loss of blood. His genitals were cut off and placed in a bag along with the knife. It's believed that the killer took the bag home and slept with the bag that evening. Yeah, this time the killer escaped unnoticed yet again, but he would ensure no one would find the bag in the Sydney harbor. Like last time, he actually weighted it down with a brick and got rid of it the following day. It was becoming obvious that a homicidal killer was plaguing the streets, and police were at a loss as to what it was, or were at a loss as to who it was or when they would catch him. Investigators decided to stake out various places that were known to be frequented by the homeless as well as seedy bars. They came up with nothing. All they could do is wait for another attack. It's March 31st, 1962. We're back in Darlinghurst, and this is in New South Wales. A man is walking with his family inside a park, and he comes across a man who is severely injured. In fact, he's barely alive. The witness ran to get police, hopeful that the wounded man would survive. The man would be identified as Frank Gladstone McLean. Again, just like all the rest, Frank met a man who promised that they could go out for a few drinks. Let's just go down nearby corner, a little dark, a little bit more private. As they were nearing the location, a knife was plunged into Frank's neck, and while Frank tried to fight off the attack, he was too drunk to do so. Actually, Frank was a lot bigger than the attacker. Had he been sober, he probably could have fought him off. Police believe that to be the case later. Mm-hmm. The two men started to tussle when all of a sudden, the man that actually finds him, along with his wife and young family, were approaching. The killer hid himself behind, it was sort of like on the corner, is how I'm guessing, kind of like on the other side of the building, until the family passed. Once they were out of sight, the killer continued his heinous attack with more stab wounds. He then removed Frank's genitals, placed them in a bag, and took them home. He would dispose of these the next day as well. As the killer is perfecting his kills, police are beginning to wonder if the perpetrator is maybe in the medical field due to his precise skill of removing the men's body parts. They're starting to wonder who would do this if it's very similar to, I guess, Jack the Ripper, that, that crosses their mind that if these are being removed with such skill, that maybe it's a doctor.
Mm-hmm. It could be. It could be a farmer, too. They're used to cutting things off down there. Of animals, too,
3 months later, on June 6, 1962, 37-year-old Patrick Joseph Hackett had just been released from prison. Now, ready to have a good time and celebrate freedom, he was ready to get drunk. Patrick was approached by a man asking him to come back to his place to continue the party. When he was quite drunk, Patrick woke up to an attack. A knife went into his neck and he began fighting back. Patrick was able to push the attacker away and use his own knife to cut the killer's hand severely. Furious and with a jolt of adrenaline, the killer drove the knife directly into Patrick's heart. He died instantly. Then the attacker violently stabbed him over and over and over, with frankly too many stab wounds to count. Exhausted from all of this, he then cut off Patrick's genitals, or tried to, but the knife had been dulled due to all the stabbing. The killer then passed out asleep on the floor next to Patrick's body. When the killer woke up hours later, he actually went to the hospital to get his hand stitched up. He told the doctor that he'd cut himself on a knife. He then returned home and took Patrick's body from the apartment and put him underneath the deli shop. Fearing police would find him, the killer ran off to Brisbane to lay low. 3 weeks pass, or thereabout. It's November 20th, 1962. A stench was permeating the air, and the neighbors called police.
Never good sign.
Upon arriving, they located a badly decomposed body, but it was so decomposed they were unable to identify the person. When an autopsy was performed, it was determined to be a man in his 40s, but that's all they could really determine. Now, knowing that the deli owner had disappeared several weeks ago, about 3, police believed this to be him, a man by the name of Alan Edward Brennan. Brennan had bought the shop and had planned to offer sandwiches and general store kinds of items to the patrons. He would then use the apartment above the deli to live in and then work the deli/store downstairs. He'd only been there about a week before disappearing, so his plan never really worked out. But there's just one problem, Jen.
Mm-hmm.
The body was not Alan Edward Brennan. In fact, Alan Edward Brennan did not exist. Brennan was actually a man by the name of Allen Ginsberg, not the author or patriot.
I was going to say, what?
Or a man by the name of William MacDonald. Screech! This is where this gets hairy with a lot of names, so just stay with me here.
Okay. Get out a piece of paper so we can follow along.
Yep. You need a little tree here, or diagram.
Chart it up.
Allen Ginsberg was born June 17th, 1924 in Liverpool, England, and he was the middle child from his parents. As a boy, he was often sullen and had no friends. At a later age, still quite young, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. At the age of 19, Allen would join the army, and it was here that an event took place.
You can join the army with schizophrenia?
Well, if you hide it, I guess.
Okay.
Here you can't, but I don't. If you hide, I'm not sure.
I would think that would be a guaranteed not, because that's pretty high stress. That would
I would think so too.
Go very well with schizophrenia.
If you hit it.
Yeah, that's true. All righty.
I don't know how it works over there. At the age of 19, Allen would join the army, and it was here that an event took place that would forever scar him, and according to him, bring him nothing but misery and humiliation. Allen would claim that a corporal in the army raped him when they were in training. The superior threatened that he would kill Allen if he ever reported the rape, so Allen did not report it. It was not long after this event, Allen realized that he was, in fact, gay. It was this realization that Allen would say helped to form his desire and disdain for men. After getting out of the service in 1947, a psychiatrist would once again diagnose him as being schizophrenic. His brother forced him to be committed into a Scotland institution. The mental hospital was beyond cruel. I'm talking terrible. Allen would be given shock therapy daily. Officials kept the hospital freezing to better control the patients who were often over-medicated or misdiagnosed. His mother would finally check him out 6 months later and bring him home. It's awful. Once back home, Alan would often meet men for sex. He would troll the restrooms and parks as well as gay bars. In 1947, Alan would claim he started having visual and auditory hallucinations. He went to a psychiatrist who, once again, placed him in a mental hospital where he would stay for 3 months. He would claim it did nothing. It did not help him whatsoever. Once he was released, he was thinking a change of scenery might help his condition. So in 1949, he moved to Canada. It didn't change things, Jen. So he moved to Australia in 1955. And it is here that Alan would now become William MacDonald. That's why you got to stay up with me, because we have some name changes coming up.
Okay.
He was only William for a short time when he found himself arrested for touching an undercover officer in a restroom. He was given bail on that and was let out. William was having a difficult time holding a job, and he was moving around from job to job and city to city. Often, he would later claim, his co-workers would tease him, calling him various names in regards to his sexuality, and usually it just became too much for him and he would leave. And I'm talking some cruel slang, if you follow me here on this. In 1961, William found himself in Sydney and took a job at the Postal Service as a letter sorter, this time using the name Alan Edward Brennan. So William/Alan became a fixture at the area's gay hotspots for anonymous encounters. It was at this time that murderous impulses began to creep in his head. Amos Hurst was his first victim. Now, as we know, he's murdered 5 people in total.
Right.
And these murders were not like anything that the good people of Australia had ever seen or even heard of. Police were desperate to end these at once. Like I said previously, doctors were being investigated. They even brought in psychics who were, claiming such various things that they were in contact with them, and he was the reincarnation of the devil. Houses were being raided if they heard that the house may be hiding this man. I'm sure it was pretty stressful and a terrible time. There was even a reward put up, but police were no closer to finding the killer. As the investigation is at a standstill, William/Alan is struggling. After he gets fired from his postal job, he gets kicked out of his house. He decided to take all his savings, and this is where he bought that deli store with the apartment above it. He was finally going to be his own boss with nobody to boss him around, and he also had a place to live and a place to work. He was pretty excited about this. This also meant that he had a hiding place in which he could bring back his victims to murder. And this was the case with James Hackett, who ended up being his last victim. And this was also the beginning of the end for the Mutilator.
The Mutilator, wow.
After Allen Ginsberg/William MacDonald/Alan Brennan freaked out after killing James Hackett in his apartment and he ran away, customers came to the store to pick up, items that they had ordered from him, and he was nowhere to be found. So they went to police and they reported him as missing. And they said it was somewhere around 3 weeks from the last time anybody had remembered seeing the store owner. Now, when the decomposing body was found, investigators and customers alike believed that the shop owner had died of natural causes. Mr. Alan Brennan was dead, or so they thought. The man thought to be Mr. Alan Edward Brennan/William MacDonald/Allen Ginsberg was actually James Hackett, the man that MacDonald had murdered. They had went with this thought, believing that James Hackett was actually the store owner, Alan Brennan, and that's what they said. Investigators, frankly, did not do a very good job of investigating, and James Hackett, under the name Alan Brennan, was buried at the Field of Mars Cemetery. So you see where we're going with this?
I do. It's confusing.
It is confusing, and it's quite the tale. So here we go. Either this heinous killer was one of the luckiest in the world, or police didn't do a very good job. The man who had killed 5 men was now free to move on. William wouldn't stay in Brisbane for very long because he was scared to death that somebody would finally see what happened. He needed to get out there, so he left for New Zealand for a while. Now, he decided that he didn't like it so much, so he came back to Sydney after he was gone for a while. He could have never been caught had he stayed away, seriously, until that meddling John McCarthy ran into the dead man who was, dun dun dun, quite alive.
It's always nice when that happens.
Yeah. So John McCarthy was an old co-worker of William's, and he ran into him as the two were walking down the street in Sydney. Like, they're really walking him down, and John was, like, shocked, to say the least, and was even more miffed when he informed William, "What are you doing? You're dead. We buried you," which he was going by Brennan at that time. And John informed him of the situation, that they found his body in the shop, and investigators thought it was him, and they buried you. Why are you walking around? Well, it finally hit him, MacDonald, that they had made a mistake, that he had gotten away with murder. Obviously, well,
yeah.
He turned around and ran. Well, that was probably not the smartest thing to do. So John McCarthy was like, something's not right. Why would you run away from me? So John McCarthy goes to police with this fantastical story, who, of course, didn't believe him. They told him he was drunk. Go home, sleep it off. So he goes home. He comes back the next day. They're like, we don't believe you. So with no one listening to him, John McCarthy goes to the Daily Mirror newspaper, and he spoke to crime reporter Joe Morris. Now, this is where this case gets the big name. The paper would run the story with the headline that has since become connected to this case: The Case of the Walking Corpse. Due to the coverage and the pressure, police were forced to reopen the case. James Hackett's body was exhumed and determined that it was not, in fact, Alan Brennan or William MacDonald at all. It was a man by the name of James Hackett. At this point, William MacDonald had taken a job in Melbourne, but his co-workers knew something was off about him. And not only was it that he was weird, but that he had bleached blonde hair and a fake mustache, and it wasn't even a good dye job, right?
What happens?
And they knew, they had heard the story. They knew that something was amiss. So they went to investigators with their suspicions, and police swooped in and arrested the man. William MacDonald was extradited back to Sydney, where he would stand trial for murder. William would confess to it all and end up claiming he was insane. He can't stand for trial. I did it, send me away. He would testify to all the gruesome details, and in fact, he would tell them details so many details that a juror would actually faint, and the judge would demand that, okay, we need to hear some of the story, but leave out the awful details. The jury didn't take long to find William MacDonald guilty of 4 counts of murder, as well as being, sane. William MacDonald was sentenced to prison for life. Now, right after being sent to prison, William beat another inmate almost to death. He was then sent to the Morisset Psychiatric Center for the Criminally Insane, where he would remain for 16 years. In 1980, William MacDonald was determined that he was sane enough to be sent back into the prison society, the mainstream. He didn't need to be in protective custody to protect him. So he was sent back in. So here he remains pretty much existing, reading, listening to classical music. He's kind of become he's known around the prison as Old Bill. And the Mutilator, which was his moniker, is the second longest surviving prisoner in Australia. Child killer Leonard Keith Lawson has been in prison since November of 1961. William MacDonald is convinced that he could never be free. He said he's so used to this and he gets everything he'd ever want, so why would he want to be back out in society? In fact, he declined a court hearing in December of 2000 that may have been able to grant him parole. He just knows that he's best where he is and plans to die there.
He's probably a bit institutionalized, too. I mean, could you imagine how scary it would be to try to go out in the world when you've been taking care? Yeah.
Terrible. Yeah. So that's the case of William the Mutilator MacDonald.
Now, is that his real name, or is that just the name we're sticking with right now?
Well, that's kind of what he's been known as, but his real name is Allen Ginsberg, right? But he changed it to William MacDonald, and then he changed it to Alan Brennan, but Alan Brennan, I don't believe, was a legal change.
Gotcha.
So if you look him up, it comes up William MacDonald, the Mutilator. He was obviously, doesn't take a scientist, but he was fighting his sexuality. You know, he would cut off genitals, I guess, because he hated himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And,
wow.
Sorry.
That's quite a case.
It's terrible.
Seriously, that's...
And Australians are so nice. That had to be terrible for them, you know? So that is it. Day 5.
Over and done with. It's in the books. Day 5, 2021.
Tomorrow's 6, and then we're halfway there.
We're living on a prayer. That's what we are. So,
Well,
all right.
I'm ready
That was
for
great.
2022. I got to tell you. I'm ready. Yep. Bring it. That's all I got for you today. I can't wait to hear from you tomorrow on day 6.
6. Yep, I got it. It's good. You're going to love
All
it.
right, buddy.
All
Okay,
right.
this was a short one, but, there's lots more about him out there if you want to check it out. He really could have gotten away with it forever
If it wasn't for those meddling kids.
I'm telling you. That's why I said that meddling
Today's episode
McCarthy.
was researched and
And
written
till
by
tomorrow,
me,
you guys.
Cam.
Remember,
For more information
lock
about
your
this
doors.
episode, as well as all the
Passing by
sources I
those
used,
open windows.
please check out our show notes
bye-bye.
or the podcast
Love ya.
website
Merry
at
Christmas.
ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by hosts Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vertesi from We Talk of Dreams. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from October Pod VHS. Our True Crime Podcast is executive produced by Nico Vertesi and Dick Vane. Make sure to like and subscribe to Our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter at Our True Crime Pod. You can email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. If you really like the show, make sure to check out our Patreon at Our True Crime Podcast. Our True Crime Podcast is an OTC production.